Hey, this is Zachlog the Great, and I am here tonight with Nate
Hello.
and with Chris,
Hello.
and we are getting together tonight to talk about G.K. Chesterton's poem, A Song of Defeat. Um, as usual, before we get rolling, I would like to remind everyone, if you like my work, if you enjoy my political, cultural commentary, my poetry performances, or if you enjoy these discussions, please support me via subscribestar.com/Zachlog-the-great. Um, and yeah, and there is going to be a link in the description. Um, YouTube recently ended the wonderfully convenient Google Hangouts on air, um, and so we are switching to Skype, a different streaming service. So I hope there won't be any glitches. It is going to look a little different, and we'll see how this goes. If there are any problems, let me know in comments. I'll see if we can address that for next time. Um, Having said that, let me see if I can get the poem up on the screen so that we'll go ahead and read over that. And there we go. And let's see. Is it visible? No.
It is.
It is. Okay. To you guys, not to me. Well, that's not terribly helpful. Or at least, anyway. Okay. A Song of Defeat by G.K. Chesterton. The line breaks and the guns go under. The lords and the lackeys ride the plain. I draw deep breaths of the dawn and thunder, and the whole of my heart grows young again. For our chiefs said done, and I did not deem it. Our seers said peace, and it was not peace. Earth will grow worse till men redeem it, and wars more evil, ere all wars cease. But the old flags reel and the old drums rattle, as once in my life they throbbed and reeled. I have found my youth in the lost battle. I have found my heart on the battlefield. For we that fight till the world is free, we are not easy in victory. We have known each other too long, my brother, and fought each other, the world and we. And I dream of the days when work was scrappy and rare in our pockets the mark of the mint, when we were angry and poor and happy and proud of seeing our names in print. For so they conquered and so we scattered when the devil rode and his dog smelt gold, and the peace of a harmless folk was shattered when I was 20 and odd years old. When the mongrel men that the market classes had slimy hands upon England's rod, and sword in hand upon Afric's passes, her last republic cried to God. For the men no lords can buy or sell, they sit not easy when all goes well. They have said to each other what naught can smother. They have seen each other, our souls, and hell. It is all as of old, the empty clangor, the nothing scrawled on a 5-foot page, the huckster who, mocking holy anger, painfully paints his face with rage. And the faith of the poor is faint and partial, and the pride of the rich is all for sale. And the chosen heralds of England's marshal are the sandwich men of the Daily Mail. And the niggards that dare not give are glutted, and the feeble that dare not fail are strong. So, while the city of toil is gutted, I sit in the saddle and sing my song. For we that fight till the world is free, we have no comfort in victory. We have read each other as Cain his brother. We know each other, these slaves and we. Okay, so Chris, it's been a while. Would you like to kick us off?
Okay. Honestly, I don't know. You see, I know a little bit about Chesterton, and this poem's given me a little trouble. I was looking around, and I can't see when he wrote it, and his
Right.
politics changed like significantly over the course of his lifetime.
There's that too, yes.
So some of it I'm not sure how to take, but I did think it was interesting. I didn't realize he had poems like this because he famously, was not active in World War I in a military capacity. Uh, he did more of, I guess, what would be considered propaganda.
Why, young man, why are you not at the front? Madam, if you will come around to the side, you will see that I am at the front.
Yes, because Chesterton was famously a very large man, who also claimed to be the most polite man in England, because on the train he could stand up and offer his seat to 2 women. But at the same time, the reason why he was fighting, why he didn't fight, as I understand it, was more to because of illness. At least at the onset, once he started working, basically for the government, kind of talking up the war, he was probably more valuable to them in that capacity. But yeah, just in general,
Well, and he actually has a book. What is it? The Appetite of Tyranny, I think it is, which is basically him making the case for England going to war against Germany in World War One.
well, he actually had a series of books tackling the issue from different perspectives, because it seemed weird. Wait, we're joining up with France to fight Germany? That was not an obvious thing for Great Britain at the time. And then also, what was it? I think they were also teamed up with Italy, which seemed a bit strange for them. They kind of had to justify that, or at least in some capacity, reconcile that with their past. And then also, I believe this was also a turning point in the relationship between Great Britain and the U.S. And each one of these things, he had a book where he constructed an argument, sort of justifying to the British people, no, we are being good British citizens by supporting this war. So yeah, he did a lot of propaganda. But yeah, so I'm just having trouble placing this, and I kind of looked for it, but I couldn't find it. But all that's kind of aside. Just in general, it's interesting because it seems to be like sort of an old soldier kind of longing for the days when he was a young soldier. And yeah, they said it was peace, but we all knew that wasn't going to last.
Well, and it's I don't even know if he's necessarily talking about like a literal. Well, the opening does sound like an actual soldier talking. That's true. Because I don't take most of this being in the context of any particular war. Although the second stanza, again, the dates would be nice to have. And I don't know, in the second stanza, what is it? He's talking about sword in hand upon Afric's passes, her last republic cried to God. And he see it. it sounds to me like he's talking about England getting involved in a war in Africa and him, not being all happy about it. Like, why are we doing this? And so, but which would that be? That might actually be the Boer War when South Africa, I don't know. It would be. I really should have looked up some of this stuff before we started. The thing is, even without the context, there are a lot of things I love about this poem. But Nate, what are your first thoughts about this?
First thoughts about this are the message of the poem is really, birds fly, dogs bark, and fighters fight. All right. And I mean, his battlefield experience or not, on a literal battlefield, this seems to me to talk at present more about the metaphorical battlefield, the battlefield of ideas in society. And so, he says, we've known each other and fought each other too long, the world and we. It's like, we understand how people are. We've seen each other. It's like they've seen each other, our souls in hell. Like, we face down the darkest impulses of mankind and ourselves alike. And we see how that works too. We know them, these slaves, and we've been like them, deluded and all of that sort of thing. And so, all this talk about how, those, we who fight for, truth and freedom, we don't rest easy in victory, is because they know that, if you're not fighting, the other side is winning. So if you're sitting there at peace, it's not because there's not a fight to be had, it's just because you're not having it, and it makes you wonder why. Because clearly the world isn't perfect, and he offers a bunch of proofs of why it isn't. And so in this unredeemed, flawed world, there is always another battle to ride toward. Winning or losing, you should be fighting, to make the world better, to continue the momentum or staunch the tide of defeat, whatever. And so that's kind of what I got out of this, is that it's, he says, we lost this one. And it's motivated him again to be like, oh man, I should have been fighting this whole time. And so now I'm going to go forward, into whatever arena, be it the physical or the societal arena. And I'm gonna swing my sword, and I'm gonna, make my charge, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully we'll be able to turn it around.
Yeah, it's there's the line, which apparently I was just trying to look this up and see who this was. I've heard it said it was Thomas Jefferson, but the thing I just looked up said no. This is, so some people say it's Thomas Jefferson, but it's really so and so. But eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. Yeah, is the line. And we live in a fallen world. It is pretty much I believe it's pretty common Christian doctrine that basically we're in enemy territory. And whatever good we have, we must fight constantly to defend that, because the nature of this world is to tear that down. And so what was I think one of the first things that struck me when I first found this poem, one of the things that attracted me to it when I was reading it the first time, was the beginning of the third stanza. It is always of old the empty clangor, the nothing scrawled on a 5-foot page, the huckster who, mocking holy anger, painfully paints his face with rage. And I'm just like, that sounds really familiar. Like that sounds like things I've seen. That's that sounds like a lot
If
of
that's not
things,
today's out-
coming.
if that is not today's outrage culture in 4 lines, then I don't know what is.
Yeah, it's the fake news.
There's a
Thank
reason
you.
why there's a reason why Chesterton was put up for sainthood, largely on being able to predict the future of politics. It's basically he just saw the way politics were then and the way they always were, and he's like, yeah, there's no reason to believe any of this is going to change.
Well, and
He is right.
there's actually, what's the other one I talked about with the distributist? It's from Songs of Education, and talking about working mothers and feminism, and it was not nearly to that degree in his day, but basically a lot of women having kids who barely know them because they're working all the time. Like, he was pretty prescient in predicting that. So it's
Yeah.
and
Our-
what it's going to do to us.
Our shining captain, Clavin, he actually has a really just bitingly appropriate piece in his Lefty's Dictionary, F is for Feminism. And he talks about, rather than doing the work of, rearing children and shaping the hearts and minds and souls of the new generation, instead they can pay and underwork, pay and pay a bunch of money so that an overworked, underpaid other woman can be taken away from her children to raise your children and shape their hearts and minds and souls. And you can come home and feel guilty and spend even more money buying your children things to try and make up for the time you didn't spend with them raising an entitled and selfish generation. I was just like, yeah, that's the problem. I'm actually not sure where that came from for me. Just sorry, bit of the ick got me there.
That was spinning off of my spinoff, so fair game. But what was but yeah, I think just this again, one of the things one of the reasons I chose this poem, one of the reasons it stuck with me when I was reading through the collection of Chesterton's poems is just this sense of like, oh, everything's going great. We're winning. Things are fantastic. It's like, no, 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 stop. Okay, take a moment to celebrate. Good, we won. Now we got to get right back out there. We got to start fighting. We got to, keep fighting, because this is not over. This is never going to be over. Well, I mean, it's like, the election of President Trump in 2016. It's like, yay, he got elected. And then there has not been a moment's peace since. Like, this wasn't.
But Sean, the chief said done, and the seer said peace.
Well, I mean, actually, no.
And the sandwichmen for the Daily Mail are out there with their portents. I mean, clearly everything is okay.
What's the that actually? I didn't think about that when I was reading through this or I was memorizing it, but that actually it's from one of the Old Testament prophets about the false prophets who say peace, peace when it is not peace, and seems quite likely that Chesterton was excuse me, seems quite likely that Chesterton was more or less deliberately referencing that, or that was in mind, and it's and it's like you'd like to be able to just go on with your life and not think about these things, but it's that there's always this fight. There are always people trying to destroy so much of the good things we have, and It's
Well, and
that,
I think it's important to remember that a lot of times our enemies, like, they're not thinking destroy what we have. They think that, they're in the fight for the good too. Like where he says, I dream of the days when the work was scrappy and rare in our pockets, the mark of the mint, when we were angry and poor and happy and proud of seeing our names in print. Like, the other side has those same feelings. Like, yeah, they're fighting an uphill battle, and to them it feels just as glorious. They feel like they're doing just as important work.
it is kind of strange for me to try to figure out how. Go ahead.
Well, that's why it was important in days past that the battle was, it was a debate, not a war. And again, the Shining Captain Claven talks about this. The idea of a debate is to, spar with ideas and, philosophies and truths, and to see who has the better grasp on the truth. And then you all move to that spot and keep going. You debate something else. Where now it's a war where the objective is to take territory. And then you exclude the enemy from that territory. And so if you take over education, you take over entertainment and the media and the purveyors of news, then you exclude the other side, and suddenly it doesn't matter what the truth is. It just matters you're pumping your thoughts. And so that it changes the nature of the conflict. As I said, once the battle shifts from being about truth and just starts being about control, well, it kind of gets a lot more serious and whole lot more dangerous. I mean, two people can disagree about ideas and still coexist. But people that believe that no one should be allowed to have other ideas, you can't coexist with those people.
There's actually, what is it? There's a good book on this I read several years ago, and there's a few people I distinctly wish I could get to read this book. It's what is it? The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, and I think the subtitle is "Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion," and he says, and a large part of his thesis is that there are it's either 6 or 7 basic moral principles that people do moral reasoning on the basis of, like 6 or 7 basic basic dichotomies that you want to be on the right side of, and that would justify that you want to justify yourself by. And he says the weird thing is, like, people who are conservative or right wing, whatever adjective you want to put on that, think in terms of all 6 of these. What's that?
Let's just depoliticize and say that they're, sort of traditional society people.
Okay, but think in terms of all 6 of these, whereas the leftist, progressive, whichever term. Yes, I know. But that whereas they tend to only think in terms of 3 of these, like 3 or not. It's not absolute, but they have much less interest in about half of them, and so like it's a fascinating book, and rather more off topic than I usually get. So I think, anyway, it's a good book, The Righteous Mind, Jonathan Haidt, highly recommend it. Interesting analysis of how people think about these questions and why. Sorry, again?
So what you're saying is we should go out and take in a bunch of hate speech.
Well, yeah, and he says, like, openly in the book that his natural inclinations are more on the liberal side, but he actually does try, like, he's, pretty fair to both sides in this, and so he's probably been actually, condemned as, hate monger, whatever, hate monger, thought criminal. So it's yeah. But anyway, that's rather further afield than I usually go. So back to the poem, if I can. Let me see. Oh, one thing which I had intended to note this earlier, and this word also has already come up in one of the Shakespeare sonnets I've done, and is coming up in another Shakespeare sonnet. It is Niggard. It is people who are stingy. So
Yeah,
you
the word
enunciate
niggard
that
in
word
this
very carefully.
context. Yes, the word niggard in this context has no racial meaning. Please understand that, everyone. It is not a common word in the modern parlance. However,
unless you're talking about
in older time, it was a very common word for stingy or greedy or tight-fisted. It has nothing to do with melanin.
Yes, rather unnecessary these days, but if you go into any like document like more than a few decades old, it will show up.
Yeah. In fact, I was curious because I was looking back in it that a variation of that word shows up in one of the Shakespeare sonnets I'd already recorded, and I looked at the automatic what do you call them, subtitles that YouTube does, and they did interpret that as N-word. But
well, while we're being immature, I'm sure y'all noticed the other line that poses a problem in a modern context.
I'm not sure.
Just the whole slimy hands thing.
Oh, yes.
I might have thought of that for a moment while Sean was reading. I was like, oh dear.
It does say England. It's not. Anyway.
Well,
back in the old days, you would say if the king had arrived with, his entire army, it says England is here with all his power. So it's customary to refer to a monarch by the name of their nation because, in a sense, he is the nation. So,
well, and we've also lost the idea of like sort of that symbol, like a totem, like the staff or whatever. So just language has changed, and sort of national imagery hasn't really kept up with that idea.
Yeah, that is a form of corrupting the innocent. It's a trope where a previously completely uncontroversial and decent statement through the march of time and the evolution of language turns into something else.
Yes, at one point, all languages will just be 100% double entendre.
What was that? Actually reminds me of there's I saw this on TV tropes where I spend rather too much time, and they were on one of them they were talking about in the description. It mentions that Orcus. It's from they're talking about one of the D&D manuals. It says in the third edition of D&D Manual of Planes, it mentioned that Orcus, the lord of the undead, might once more be on his throne, one bony hand clutching his terrible rod.
I think also the idea of sandwichmen has sort of fallen out of favor. I'm imagining sandwich boards, but
yes, that's what they're
you
talking
don't
about.
see
But
that
yeah,
these days.
What do you think other people are thinking? Jared?
Oh God, I feel so sad for the people at Subway that hired him.
When you said the sandwich man and all that, I was thinking of Rorschach from Watchmen. I was like, some crazy-eyed, unkempt ruffian out there with his stuff on and saying, whatever it says.
Well, and
12 years until the climate is over. 12 years. Abolish the farting cows now.
And the image it calls to mind for me is somebody who is, actively trying to sell the newspapers and does not care what they say. They will actively try to inflame people's emotions because they don't actually care about anything other than selling papers.
So it was the early 20th century clickbait.
Basically. And I mean, we have it on just like anytime you have like a news source these days, whether it's, actual newspapers, stuff online, TV networks, it's like for the most part, they don't care about giving you like information. All they care is that you are, paying attention to them.
Yep.
Well,
we have the most lemony yellow journalism around these days. I mean, the guys who got the whole thing started off, and the guys that got like chopped up for this back in the day, that raised such a hue and cry about this yellow journalism, and the guys that got hit by it, they would, wherever they lie in eternity, they are mad right now. Like, why couldn't I have been in that time? Golly. The journalism, I will say, in America, in the mainstream, is dead. It's dead. And it has died its final death in our lifetime with the advent of cable news. Because, much like Congress shouldn't be in session all year, the news should not be on TV all day. There should be, there's something we need to address. Here's what's going on. Okay, let's make in the example of Congress. No, we should go ahead and we should go ahead and legislate this issue because it is a good legislative issue, and then we'll go home. We do not need to be here making thousands of new statutes a year, passing. I have never heard of this until a couple of weeks ago, and I'm still kind of furious about it. Non-binding resolutions. Congress passes non-binding resolutions about things, which is basically Congress going, this is what Congress thinks, but is not doing anything about it. Who cares? We do not pay you people to do that. We pay you to do the business of the country. How about the next person who leads a vote on a non-binding resolution when there's not a budget for 10 years now? They get shot on the floor of the House, or just the master of arms comes up and says, I'm sorry, I'm going to use the ceremonial, I'm going to use the ceremonial musket to blast you now because clearly you are a traitor to the people.
Yes, but if they're passing non-binding resolutions, that does mean they're not passing legislation that will actively make my life worse.
Guess what? Congress should be in the business of repealing a lot of legislation right now. Anyway, just like that, right, the 24-hour news cycle leads to a lot of stupidity too, because there should not be a 24-hour news cycle. It should be, hey, today, this is what happened. It happened several hours ago. Therefore, we have had time to actually, figure out accurate information that we are now giving you free of sauce. Here's the meat of the issue. Find the sauce yourself. Now for weather.
Yeah,
Maybe sports.
I saw recently Neil deGrasse Tyson had actually posted something placing the placing the news coverage of mass shootings into context, showing that it's terrible, but compared with all the other things Americans die of, like, this shouldn't be newsworthy except for it's a spectacle. And Smash Mouth of all groups was basically like, F you for putting it into context, because feelings are what matter.
He's taken a lot of flack for that. Like, people, apparently a lot of people on the left.
He's one of the big long coward screeds and was like, I'll be more sensitive in the future. No, you won't. You're not going to talk anymore. You have sacrificed your freedom of speech on the altar of outrage. So, good job, Neil.
And there are things that, I agree with him on and I disagree with him on. But when someone's saying, hey, let's stop and think about this logically, and they're getting shot down, that just shows you right there's a problem.
Absolutely. And that's what, and again, that's one of the things Chesterton was talking about to kind of make the loop back around. That's one of the things he's talking about. These wars will get more evil until all wars cease. Well, these ideological wars are going to do the same thing. Previously, it was a sparring match. Now the gloves are off. It is a war, and one side is fighting it like a war. The other side is acting like it's still a sparring match, and got way too much of that side's blood on the sand because they haven't actually stood up and drawn the knife yet.
So what was returning to the poem? The terrible sounding word, those two lines, I actually do really like that part of the poem. And the niggards that dare not give are glutted, and the feeble that dare not fail are strong. And that is very much like the Chesterton kind of he loved playing with paradox. And these stingy people who dare not give, who cannot dare to be generous, are glutted. They are just overfed, stuffed to the point that they're going to vomit. And these weak people who dare not fail. It is a kind of a strange paradox. It is a weak person who doesn't dare to fail. Strong, confident people don't care about failing, because failing is, and this is, I have to admit, this is something I'm kind of awful at. This is probably something I need to fix about myself. But failing is a part of life. The only way to not fail is to not do anything. And so, the feeble that dare not fail, which is kind of, the kind of people who get attracted to government jobs, who get sucked up in bureaucracy, who get entrenched in bureaucracy. A strong, confident person knows that failing is a part of life. In fact, there's one person I like following who has a fascinating and many-faceted career. A slogan of his is "fail faster." If something is going to go down, put everything into it, and if it's going to go down, it's better that it goes down quickly. It's better that you find out what's wrong, you can sink it and move on to something that's going to succeed. And so, I really love those two lines of this poem.
Yeah, and from the context of a soldier that's fighting, I mean, soldiers know that no matter how the war goes, they're not going to be the ones that really profit from it. It's the people behind them that are saying, oh no, you go over there, you go risk your life, you put yourself in these dangerous situations. I'll be here safe, not risking anything, but when the war's over, I'm the one that profits from it.
Yeah. And
These days, it's even worse than that. It's just, like I said, it's just the outrage mob. It's a bunch of people that just want to screech and be like, this is terrible. You should take it back. And for some reason, we've given these screeching harpies way too much societal power. Look, just the fact that it pisses off a couple of million people doesn't actually mean all that much compared to, I don't know, the mass of one country. For instance, if I make 1.5 million people blood-curdlingly furious, like to where all they can do all day is breathe venom and revile my name until the next shiny thing grabs their attention. That is
Then
half
your name
a
is
percent.
President Trump.
Get on my
Sorry,
train.
go ahead.
That's it. That sounds like a lot of people. But the thing is, that's less than 0.5% of this country. 99.5% of people don't care. And that's great. So why should we care what the 0.45% of the population thinks? Why should we bend the entire fabric of our society and warp it to an untenable shape until it cracks into deadly splinters over what a vanishingly small amount of people think?
Yeah. Why should the peace of a harmless folk be shattered?
Well,
exactly.
And that actually, I hadn't thought of this before. It actually reminds me of a kind of perverse version of the Pareto distribution. Do you guys know about this? It's basically this principle that in
your results.
Right, like in any organization or in any field of endeavor, and there is an actual mathematical formula which I don't. There's 80-20. I've heard is one version. I've heard other versions of it, but a very small percentage of the people are going to produce an overwhelming amount of the value of that organization, or today about 10 recording artists have play virtually all of the songs you're going to hear on radio, or well, if anyone listens to radio still. I'm not entirely sure. It's been a while since I've listened to regular broadcast radio, but
I will say local college stations actually not bad. They actually play a pretty interesting selection of music.
And so this actually kind of seems like a perverse version of that. A very tiny portion of society is making an enormous amount of noise and able to push and able successfully to push really weird and weird.
I would go with abhorrent if I was going to be the one making adjectives here.
I was actually trying to get to to moral language wicked agenda. That's actually something Chesterton says himself in one of his essays. Like modern journalism and modern discourse seems to fear nothing as much as a simple moral statement. And so they will say that if a man murders his grandmother in the park, they will say it's insane, or they will say it was a gruesome spectacle. But insane is not a moral question. Insane is a question of rationality. A gruesome spectacle is not a moral question. A gruesome spectacle is a question of aesthetics. And he actually, give me a second, I'll see how much. He says, in terms of aesthetics, you would have to know the grandmother both before and after the beating to decide whether aesthetically she was improved by the treatment. But the relevant Chesterton is fantastic.
Yes, yes. In orthodoxy, whenever he starts going over his personal moral philosophy, like he understands that with the state of the age, he can't start with the existence of good and evil. So he actually starts with the idea of sanity and insanity.
But he says, but the relevant question about a man beating his grandmother to death in the park is not a question of rationality or aesthetics. It is that it is a wicked thing to do, and that is the one thing you will never read in the newspaper that is describing this account. I'll have to see if I can find that one, Nate, and send that to you, because it appears you would enjoy it. But well, I don't know. I think I've covered most of the things I wanted to say about this poem. Chris, what about you?
I think so. And I think like part of the nature of the poem is also to sort of branch out from it and to go on tangents. So I think it was actually successful in that regard.
Nate, did you have any other thoughts you needed to get in on this one?
No, I think I've rambled around the backwoods of political philosophy and outrage far enough tonight.
Okay. Well, in that case, thank you, Chris, again for joining us. It's good to talk with you, and I hope before too long we can resume doing this on a regular basis. Thank you, Nate, and God be with you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.